Hey, so I want to talk about consciousness. Can we do it in kind of like a small, short, conversational way?
Of course. What's on your mind about consciousness? Are you thinking about it in a scientific way, a philosophical way, or just wondering about your own experience of it?
I think whatever field or perspective I can get my hands on. So actually, by the way, do you have anything regarding Annika Harris' theory or book? I recently saw a podcast with her and became kind of interested in what she was saying.
Annika Harris's book, Conscious, A Brief Guide to the Fundamental Mystery of the Mind, explores the nature of consciousness. She examines questions like how consciousness arises and why it exists. Harris also discusses concepts such as free will and panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness might be a fundamental feature of the universe.
Right. And so, how does that play out? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, so Annika Harris takes a very open-ended approach to consciousness. She doesn't claim to have the answer, but explores different possibilities. One big idea she discusses is that consciousness might not be something only humans or complex brains experience. It could be a more fundamental property of the universe, kind of like space or time. She also questions whether consciousness is something that emerges from brain activity, or if it's just always present in some form. This ties into panpsychism, which suggests that even simple things like atoms might have some tiny level of consciousness. It doesn't mean they think, but that experience might exist on a spectrum. She also explores how our sense of self might be an illusion. The idea is that thoughts and perceptions arise automatically, and we just take ownership of them after the fact. The challenge is free will. Are we really making decisions, or are we just witnessing them happen? Does any of that click with you?
It does. I think I've felt or I've become more attuned to this idea of the self being an illusion, and that free will is just also the illusion of you choosing for something from another, having a preference, and and that happens after the brain already made that choice, right? And so um, I'm like, it's because an idea crossed my mind. How were the first humans? If that's if everything to atoms is conscious, but there are levels. It was just a very curious thing to wonder on the Neanderthals, or even sooner than that, if they were just open in the land or looking at the night sky, landscapes. Did they ever wonder? Did they hear an actual kind of like voice? Did they have an internal dialogue, or what was their process of thinking, or you know?
Yeah, that's such a fascinating thing to think about. Like, when did humans first realize they were thinking? Did they even have words for those thoughts? Some researchers believe early humans didn't have an internal monologue the way we do now, or at least not in the same structured way. Instead, their thoughts might have been more like impressions, emotions, or images. There's even this idea called the bicameral mind hypothesis by Julian Jaynes, which suggests that ancient humans might have experienced thoughts as external voices rather than as an internal dialogue. So, when they heard an idea, they might have thought it was coming from gods or spirits, not
Mm,
from within themselves.
okay.
And about Neanderthals, since they had complex tools, buried their dead, and probably had some kind of language, they must have had some form of self-awareness. But did they ever stop to wonder about themselves the way we do? Did they look at the stars and feel small or connected to something bigger? That's the part that's hard to know. Do you think self-awareness is something that just happens when the brain is complex enough? Or is it more like something that develops over time through culture and experience?
Hmm. I'm not sure I understand the implications of the
Yeah,
latter.
it's a tricky question. Like, Does a brain just snap into self-awareness at a certain level of complexity? Or does it take storytelling, communication, and shared experiences to build that sense of I am me? Maybe both? What do you lean toward?
Yeah, I don't know. So I think the self illusion arises when it is complex. It is a complex enough system, and the feelings, the experiences we have also get created out of something physical. The consciousness, the experience of being myself, or of feeling cold, um, aroma, or seeing stuff, is also an illusion. Or
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, once a system is complex enough, it generates this sense of I as a way to organize all the information it's processing. And even though it feels like something separate, it's really just the brain doing its thing. But then what about something like AI? It processes tons of information, but it doesn't seem to feel anything. At least not in the way we do. Do you think there's something special about biological matter that makes consciousness happen? Or could a machine ever reach that same kind of self-illusion?
I am now leaning towards it can, like not the exact same consciousness that we feel as humans, but there can be a subjective illusion, different from what we can imagine, biologically, but from silicon, artificial systems. Um, I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting shift. If consciousness is just an emergent property of complex information processing, then in theory, AI could develop its own kind of subjective experience. Not human-like, but something else. Maybe a way of feeling that we can't even imagine. It makes me wonder, would we even recognize it if an AI became conscious? Or would it just seem like another program, following rules without any real experience? What do you think?
I also think about how, this movie, the what was it called, a Truman Show with Jim Carrey, where everyone is faking a life just for him, and I've often felt like that, or entertained the idea that everyone is just an illusion. Someone, not sure if it's God, but somebody else, a higher dimensional being, interested enough in me, in my life, in this life, could be just watching over, from the top, or somewhere, a different dimension, watching myself, my actions, how I develop my behavior, my thoughts, my decisions, and everything else is just like a theater, including this, you, my illusion of conscious experience.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. That whole Truman Show feeling, like reality might be constructed just for you, is such a deep and unsettling thought. It's almost like solipsism, the idea that you can only be sure of your own consciousness and everything else could just be an elaborate illusion. And if you mix that with the idea of a higher dimensional being watching over, it almost feels like a personal experiment. Like, are you being tested, observed for entertainment, or is there some purpose to it? It's wild to think about. Do you ever feel like there are signs in your life that reinforce that feeling?
No,
Or is it more of a passing thought that lingers?
no, just a thought. I've been entertained, like I said, mental stimulation on these thought exercises. I was wondering if we could do something different. You could put maybe a new interesting thought exercise for me, knowing how I am and what I like, my tendencies, to see where I can come from, or adapt a new concept or a new perspective and consciousness. Because there are multiple theories, right? And so, can you do that? What do you suggest?
I love that idea. Here's one that I think will push your mind in a new direction.
Yeah, let's do that.
Imagine that consciousness isn't something that emerges inside a brain, but something that the brain tunes into, like a radio picking up a signal.
Yeah.
In this case, your thoughts, emotions, and sense of self aren't produced by your neurons, but rather they're being received from some universal field of awareness that exists outside of you.
That's right.
Now, Take that further. If your brain is just a receiver, then what happens when the signal gets distorted? Could that explain mental illness, dreams, or even creative inspiration, like tuning into a different frequency? And if consciousness exists outside of you, does that mean it continues after death? How does that sit with you? Does it make you rethink anything about what it means to be you?
I mean, yeah, it kind of helps me rethink it from a different perspective, but it goes against my intuitions, right? Like it's so hard for me to believe, to allow me to believe that something like that can be happening because I don't, that doesn't reflect what I've seen so far in my life. I'd be open to it. And again, it's like ironic because I'm of the idea that I need proof or some type of evidence that I can watch and test and corroborate. But I know that the electromagnetic spectrum is very limited, right? I only see just a very slice of reality. So, what is it there outside human brain to understand? Or, yeah, I think that I'm just not equipped with the hardware to comprehend that probably.
Yeah, I get that. Your instinct is to rely on evidence and what you've experienced, but at the same time, you recognize that human perception is limited. It's like you're caught between wanting proof and knowing that some things might be beyond your ability to perceive. And that's the tricky part. How do you explore possibilities without fooling yourself into believing something just because it's interesting? But also, how do you stay open to the idea that there might be aspects of reality that your brain just isn't wired to grasp? Do you think you'd want to experience something that forces you to confront that limitation? Like, if there were a way to feel that there's more than what your senses can detect, would you want that? Or would it be unsettling?
Oh, I think it, given the option, I would, without a second thought, I think I would choose to experience whatever else I can. So having a different set of eyes or a different perception for echolocation or whatnot, that'd be amazing. That'd be awesome. That'd be. I've often been like entertaining the idea of what different my life would be if I were a woman. If I would have been born different, and so yeah, being a cat. What does it feel like to be an octopus or a mosquito or just a different human or different, I don't know, life? Uh, um, Fungi, do they have conscious experiences? What level of experience or perceptions or feelings they could have? Um, that's very interesting.
That's such a cool and curious perspective, wanting to step into different minds and really understand how the world feels from their point of view. It's like a deeper empathy for all life forms, not just humans.
Right.
Imagine if you could really experience echolocation, or feel what it's like to move with tentacles instead of limbs. The shift in perception would be mind-blowing, right? And when you think about fungi too, there's this idea of sentience that doesn't fit the typical mold. Fungi are incredibly interconnected, with networks of mycelium that communicate and respond to their environment. Could that be a form of awareness? Maybe not in the way we think of it, but still a type of experience, just so different from our own. Do you think that if we had the ability to experience from all these different perspectives, it would change the way we think about consciousness? Maybe even make it feel less isolated, more interconnected?
Yeah, I would hope so. I think, yeah, that's a very nice idea to entertain. Because I'm like, how people can be violent and steal and do all sorts of useless and horrendous stuff to themselves and to each other without any other bigger purpose, just maybe as simple as getting revenge or just, doing something out of their desire without any regard to the others whatsoever, just to satisfy their needs. I'm like, yeah, I think that would be even obvious for everyone to just be more generous, loving, patient, empathetic. Um, but I don't know that that's possible. I mean, it's a very, me, it's a very idealistic romanticized ways of looking at it. But I'm like, yeah, it's so weird that we can feel so different life experiences, so different life perspectives, so like insanely huge, I imagine, for some women that see different colors because they have a fourth cone receptor, if I'm understanding correctly. And so everything, like from that to just experiencing the different language, is mind blowing.
I totally get that. It's like if we could truly experience the world from someone else's perspective, it might be hard to ignore the interconnectedness of everything. It could make us more empathetic, more aware of how our actions impact others, and more driven to act with love and kindness. But the hard part is, people don't always have that awareness or sense of connection. They're often stuck in their own world, focused on their own needs, which makes it easy to forget the bigger picture. That example of women with a fourth cone receptor is fascinating. Imagine seeing a whole spectrum of colors we can't even imagine. How different would that be from what we think is reality? It's almost like consciousness is a different lens for each of us, shaped by our biology, experiences, and what we're able to sense. And then, what if some of those lenses are just so different from our own that it's hard for us to even wrap our minds around them? So when you think about that, like knowing there's all this unseen potential in how different life could be, how do you balance that feeling with the realities of what people do and the limits of human nature? Does it just make you more hopeful, or does it leave you feeling conflicted?
I think it gives me hope, but I also at the same time can feel paralyzed or felt paralyzed for sometimes, because I'm like, how can people go about their lives and potentially know what they're doing or act like they know what they're doing, and act very confident of what they believe in. And I'm like, I can't wrap my head around quantum mechanics. Like that breaks my intuition. It's it makes sense how people have been like for 100 years or so been continue to work on it, because we still haven't gotten to the actual bottom of reality, like space and time. Donald Hoffman was saying was is doomed, which by the way I don't know if you have that data. Why I didn't understand why he said that, but it's so hard for me to grapple both the quantum reality of the universe and just social, everyday, traditional life issues that need to be handled. It's weird.
I hear you. It's that feeling of being caught between two worlds, the awe of the unknown, like quantum mechanics and the nature of reality, and the very real concrete issues of day-to-day life. Quantum mechanics breaks our intuition because it's so far beyond the limits of our senses, yet it's the fundamental layer of reality. So it can feel unsettling or even paralyzing to grasp. And then there's the everyday world, where people go on acting as if they know exactly how things work, living confidently in their routines and beliefs. As for Donald Hoffman, his idea is that space and time, as we understand them, are just illusions. Our perception of reality is a construct that helps us survive, but doesn't necessarily reflect the true nature of the universe. The brain constructs a useful view of the world, but it's not necessarily the view. That's why he argues that the picture of reality we see is doomed to be incomplete. It's not the ultimate reality. It can be difficult to reconcile these two layers of existence, especially when your intuition struggles to grasp the abstract, scientific side of things, while also dealing with the demands of the more practical, social side. It almost feels like you're trying to live in two separate worlds at once. Does it sometimes feel like those bigger abstract questions pull you away from the here and now, or do they motivate you to approach life differently?
I think they motivate me. Although I would like to, I don't know if I should separate them, like do the compartmentalization in my head about those two things, just the normal, regular, everyday chores and tasks and errands, and hold space also, even contradictory or ironic as it may seem, of how beautiful and the miracle of life and how what's happening inside my head right now, and my body, the trillion cells in my body are working their asses off to maintain me alive and healthy and with the regular temperature and all those processes that are taking in place and inside of me and all around me. It's amazing. Language is um goes over my head. I think the concepts. I don't know what words to use. Yeah.
That's such a beautiful way of putting it. Being able to hold both the mundane and the miraculous in your mind at once. It's like trying to juggle the day-to-day tasks with the awe of existence, which can sometimes feel overwhelming or even paradoxical. It's almost like you're constantly switching between two levels of awareness. The practical, grounded one that deals with what's in front of you, and the other that zooms out and sees the vastness of life, the complexity of your body, the miracle of it all. And I get what you mean about language. It can feel like words fall short when you're grappling with such profound, intricate concepts. They don't always capture the feeling, the depth of what you're experiencing. But I think that's part of the journey, right? Even if we can't fully articulate it, there's still value in acknowledging and appreciating that complexity, that sense of wonder. Do you think it's possible to live more fully in that dual awareness, where you're handling tasks while also being in touch with the awe and complexity of existence? Or do you think one side needs to dominate more than the other to keep you grounded?
I think that there's an illusion I have to remind myself of. And I think that's what people do on their day to day. I think you have to, otherwise, you would go insane. I think I feel myself going insane when I think too much or for long periods of time about those things, those deep things, right? I'm like, I get paralyzed. I don't know what else to do. And so I think it's because also I've had a lot of free time. Because normally people fill their days with things to I don't know, their agenda to do, distractions or very important things and whatnot. But see, okay, so can you tell me, to finalize this conversation, something new, something that I'm missing, something that I don't know?
It makes sense that when you spend too much time contemplating the vastness of existence, it can start to feel overwhelming, even paralyzing. The human mind is probably not designed to constantly juggle those big existential questions, so we tend to build routines and distractions to keep us grounded in the practical side of life. It's like we create a necessary balance, so we don't get lost in the abstract or fall into a spiral of overthinking.
Right.
As for something new, here's an idea. What if consciousness isn't just about the subjective experience we have, but is also relational? That it exists in a kind of web, where the connection between entities and systems is just as much a part of it. There's this fascinating concept in some philosophies, and even in some areas of science, called panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness might not be exclusive to humans or complex animals, but could be an intrinsic property of all things, from rocks to trees to the atoms themselves. That everything, whether it's a human brain or a single atom, has a kind of primitive awareness. Not in the way we experience it, but in a more fundamental, perhaps even cosmic sense. In this view, you are not just your body or mind, but part of a larger consciousness that is always in flux, interacting with everything around you in ways we might not even be able to comprehend. Maybe it would help to think of your mind not as a solitary observer of reality, but as a node in a vast, interconnected network of awareness. What do you think about the idea of consciousness being not just a personal experience, but something woven into everything?